Alright, so this is Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. This is being played on PC, of course. This is the third in the trilogy. Follows Castlevania Lords of Shadow and Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2 Mirrors of Fate. So we are currently in the prologue here. We are controlling Gabriel Belmont. At this point, he is known as Dracula. Dracula, the Lord of Shadow, whatever you want to call him. So first things first, we're going to drop the difficulty down to the lowest, because the highest difficulty is extremely difficult. Also because this is a, easiest difficulty run. So this tutorial is just kind of teaching the basics and everything. So instead of just covering that, we'll give you a little bit of backstory about the story of this game. Spoilers for the first two games, of course. You play as Gabriel Belmont. He is the basically the strongest warrior the Brotherhood of Light has. The Brotherhood of Light, of course, being the priests and all the noble warriors who protect the citizens of the various people across this country and other countries from the creatures of darkness. Gabriel Belmont, being the strongest of the Brotherhood, was the easiest target to be manipulated by Zobek, the Lord of the Necromancers. So he manipulates Gabriel without Gabriel knowing into murdering his entire village as well as his own wife. And Gabriel, his memory is completely wiped, basically, and so he thinks it was actually the creatures of darkness that did it. So he sets out on a journey to destroy all of the Lords of Shadow, following directly into Zobek's plan. So he travels across the country into the lands of the evil, and he defeats Cornelius, Lords of the Lycanthropes. I'll stop my story a little bit here. Just go over this here. So we're going to see a little bit of our two magical weapons. This is the Void Sword. This is going to give us a little faster attacks, less damage, but lifesteal. And the next one it's going to show is the Chaos Claws, which is going to be heavier damage, slower attacks, and the ability to break enemies' defenses. We don't actually have any combo moves, really, here. We have just like a couple of basic combos. But none of the special moves. We'll see a lot more of that later on. So as Dracula here continues to fight off the Brotherhood of Light as they rampage his castle, just go back to the little history lesson. So he defeats Cornelius, Lord of the Lycanthropes. He defeats Camille, Lord of the Vampires. And then as he goes to defeat... as he goes to the final area, he encounters Zobek, finds out that he's been tricked, and defeats Zobek. Does not kill Zobek, which is the important part. And then he actually fights Satan, who... Yeah, so Zobek manipulated Gabriel. In turn, Zobek was manipulated by Satan, who believed he was in power the whole time, but when in actuality, Satan was. So then you defeat Satan, and that's kind of where the story stops making sense, more or less. Gets a little weird after that, so back to the prologue here. We are fighting the current leader of the Brotherhood of Light. Kind of has a winged suit here. Both of the boss fights here are really annoying, because he likes to jump around a lot, which makes it really hard to stick to him. As well, you don't really have many damaging moves at this point in the game, so you're basically just stuck hitting him with the whip. And you don't actually even have combo moves. You kind of have guillotine and... you do have guillotine, you do have combined whip, but you don't really have anything else, which makes it a pretty difficult fight. You just have basic magic besides that. So we're going to do a little bit of fights and platforming here. After the Satan fight, it gets a little weird. So, while you were entering Camille's castle, Castlevania, as it were, to fight her, You encounter her adopted daughter. She talks with you for a bit, spares you for some reason, and then after the game, one of the DLCs calls you back because it turns out the Lords of Shadow, their very existence was keeping a supernatural being from another dimension locked away inside his dimension. But now that all of the Lords of Shadow have disappeared, there is a very large threat that he's going to awaken, come back, and destroy this world. So you have to go stop him. So you adventure with, I believe her name is Lauren, the vampire, through Camille's castle in order to get to the cage or the dimensional entrance to this other dimension where this otherworldly being is being held. As a result, when you get there, she gives you a little bit of information that she might have kept from you up until this point, which is that a human can't enter the portal. If a human enters the portal, they'll die immediately, being consumed by all the powerful magics and whatnot. So Laura makes a deal with you. And by makes a deal, I mean she doesn't really give you a choice. She gives her own life to transfuse her blood into yours, such that your blood is filled with the blood of a vampire, and you can go in and save the world. Which you do, Gabriel does. But at the end of it, Gabriel's emotions kind of all collaborate, along with the fact that he is no longer human, and all the power kind of rush into his head. And he kind of throws the life of light and goodness away, and he decides to turn to a life of evil. So he throws away his vampire killer, the only weapon that can actually kill a supernatural creature of this power. So Lords of Shadow, Dracula, Satan, anything like that, throws it away into the abyss and comes back to the real world. Much later, so that's Castlevania 1 and all the DLCs. 40 years later, Trevor Belmont, the son Dracula didn't know he had. Again, this is where the story kind of takes a little weird turn. Turns out the Brotherhood of Light knew about Zobek's plan and everything that would happen. So instead of trying to stop it or anything like that, instead they decide to to birth Gabriel's son Trevor in secret, and then hide him away and raise him somewhere else. So he gets raised in the Brotherhood of Light, and gets told about his real parentage 40 or 50 years later. And he goes into the castle to seek revenge on his father and clear his family name. But he is not successful. He gets into a fight with Dracula and does really well until he stops doing well. And he actually dies at the hands of his father. In his dying breath, he reveals who he is to Gabriel, his son. And Gabriel kind of has a moment, a heartfelt moment, probably the first he's had in, the entire 50 years. And he attempts to revive his son, again, by infusing his own blood into his son's. He doesn't lose his life for this. And at the time, he doesn't realize that it worked, so he seals the body away and carries on. He actually attacks the village from where Trevor lived, and kills everybody except for Trevor's son, Simon, who was protected by his mother, Sypha. She protected him from the forces of evil as he fled. He gets adopted by a clan that lived in a mountain and raised as a warrior, until the day then he finally decides to attack the castle and seek revenge for his father. Again, not knowing what Dracula is to him. As he enters the castle, Alucard, Trevor awakens, and they cross paths several times in their ascent to Dracula's throne. They fight Dracula. They succeed in defeating him for the time being. And then he awakens at some later point. And that's really the last key point between now and then. So now we are at the final part of the prologue here. We have destroyed the giant siege engine. We are now fighting with, I believe his name is Ronald, the leader of the Brotherhood of Light. Like I was saying before, this fight is pretty annoying because he likes to jump around a lot. If you're lucky, he will only jump once or twice, and you can get some pretty good hits on him. Of course, there are two jumps that are always going to happen. These are the two here. And then you try and get as many hits in as quickly as possible. You want to use the Chaos Claws as much as possible. They do a lot of damage, of course. If you can get blocks off, you can do even more damage because you get a little bit of reduction there. This fight actually was a little poorly because I wasn't blocking for some reason. I was trying to get in quick hits instead. But it still isn't too bad of a fight. He's almost dead here at this point. So this move here, as soon as he puts his two swords together, he actually raises his defense a little bit. So you gotta hit him a couple times with the Chaos Claws to drop his defense down so you can do more damage. And right here I'm just trying to get a couple last hits in. So at the end of this fight here, there's a cutscene here. It's a really powerful cutscene in terms of the message of the game, where the leader of the Brotherhood of Light is, in his last breaths, trying to cast a spell given to him, or from the power given to him by God. He's trying to cast a spell, a very powerful spell. Gabriel kind of laughs and shrugs it off, like, that's not going to work on me. I was chosen by your God. And he walks up to him and finishes chanting the spell with him and causes an explosion which destroys all of Castlevania and pretty much everything in miles surrounding it. So we jump forward 500 years here. We're going to touch back on this event later on, but we're going to jump ahead probably about, sorry, I said 500, but it's actually about 800 years. Dracula went into a slumber after that and was rudely awoken. But he doesn't see the cause of him being awakened. So he steps outside into the world and he sees a fake ghost of his son, Alucard, who isn't dead. This is, again, I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. But he falls into this alley and finds a spawn of Satan. And we're actually going to up the difficulty here because we want to take as little hits as possible. We can't win this fight. We're looking to get to a certain health threshold as quickly as possible. So we drop the difficulty here so his hits do more damage, and we just try to get hit as quickly as possible, forcing his move cycles to send him in the next cutscene here. Dracula in his weakened state, his attacks are very weak and he is very slow to move. So fortunately most of these cutscenes are skippable here. And we wake up in a room here, and we kind of regain our consciousness in here, and then this interesting Grinch image pops up. I give a little background on this. The cutscene itself isn't terrible. It's just a little unfortunate, the depiction that it has. It's nothing super gory or anything, nothing nudity wise, just a little unfortunate, not really something you'd want to show a kid, I guess. So I normally pop up that picture there while I skip through the cutscenes, do a little bit of gameplay. Unfortunately, there are 3 cutscenes in here that aren't exactly the best things to show. I normally just skip those over. Unfortunately, of course, those are the only 3 that aren't skippable. So I just throw up a prop image, do a little talking to the chat, maybe a card trick or 2. So right here, we're just learning all of our skills. Again, this is New Game Plus, so we start off with all of the experience we've earned through any previous playthrough, so any of my speedrun attempts, all of the experience gets thrown into the total there. As well, we also have all of the magic bars and health bars fully unlocked, so we have full magic and full health. I did a little trick opening that first door there. It's called the somersault skip. So you can cancel a decent amount of animations and I guess cutscenes that follow them by pressing a input at the same time you do a somersault. It's very finicky where you can and can't do them though. If I had done it on the second door, I would have crashed the game. So this is going to introduce our stealth sections to the game. Not a huge fan of them. I don't feel like they add a lot to the game, but they're there. So one of the main, there's a couple different main attributes or characters that the stealth sections add. One of them is being able to turn into a rat to get past some enemies. Now it's important to note that these Golgoroth guards are completely invincible. Not only that, you actually have all of your damaging moves disabled. So it's also worth noting in stealth sections, this is where we have access to our fastest movement in the game. It's unfortunate that it's only during stealth sections, but since most of our abilities are disabled, we do have a couple things left. We actually do have shadow daggers, which do a minimal amount of damage, but would cause you to insta-lose because you'd get alert the guard and you'd get killed and have to restart from the last checkpoint. However, if you dash and then start a shadow dagger or a bat swarm or anything else like that, and then keep dashing, if you just toggle on and off, you'll start your dash animation and then cancel it and start it again, which means you can get the fastest part of your dash, which is the start, over and over again. So you just dash through the screen like nothing. So this here is going to introduce the bat swarm. So the bat swarm is used when you have multiple Golgoroth guards in an area. You throw the bat swarm at one of the guards, they get distracted by the bats, and then the other one will go over and figure out what's going on. So it is important to note that if you do run in front of them, even while they're like this, if the other one catches you, you will reset, stuff like that. It's also important to note, this is going to be important for later, like I said, they are completely invincible and they cannot take damage because there is nothing in the game that would allow them to take damage. So here, again, we're going to see our the fake ghost of our son, Trevor. Again, Trevor's still alive, more or less, just in a different form. So we're going to follow him down this corridor, and as we start walking down the corridor, the world gets a little hazy, and this is where the game throws all logic out the window. So we leave real world, a building which is built inside of the remnants of the old Castlevania, and we enter Castlevania in the past, question mark. We are now inside Castlevania as it was before the explosion 800 years ago. Yeah. So we're gonna dash around Castlevania here. We're still trying to parse it all together here. There is a couple anomalies about the castle. For example, there's blood everywhere that shouldn't be, like congealed blood in the cogs here. Turns out, I don't know if this is the real Castlevania or this fake Castlevania, but the castle's actually alive, which makes sense in a lot of ways. A lot of the anomalies that happen inside the castle would make sense, but the castle's alive, and the castle doesn't want you to leave. So we're going to do one of our first skips here. This one doesn't save too much time. It saves about 30 seconds maybe. It's also the easier method of the two. There was an older method which didn't save as much time. So right here, you're supposed to go all the way to the left. You're supposed to do a bunch of parkouring and points and stuff, but you can just run at the last point here and then grab on and jump up. There was another method just on the right of using a technique which allowed you to raise your minimum height So you could do a ground move while you were in the air. We'll get into that a little later. We'll use that technique for a different skip later on. So right now we're doing a little bit of parkour as the castle tries to tell us not to leave, begging us to stay, to be reunited with the castle, but we're just going to parkour over everything. We're going to step into our first boss fight here. So this first boss fight is basically a bunch of rubble, which has been possessed by the blood of the castle here. So we first start off with the Void Sword, we get a couple hits in, and then it takes us away from us, so that we can learn about the mana orbs. So how magic works in this game, there's two ways to get in it, from the mana pots, of course, or if you get in enough hits without taking any damage, you'll start to knock magic orbs out of the enemies, which you can then channel into either one or both of your magical types, so that you can get magic bar. There's not really any reason to get magic here. We're not worried about our health bar, because he doesn't do much damage, and B, we aren't going to be taking many, if any, hits. So we're just focused on hitting him as quickly as possible with our very limited techniques. You'll notice I'm not really doing many combos here. I'm just doing normal attacks. I can only damage this boss where the blood is, so I can't really do any combo attacks, because most of the combo attacks actually combine a mixture of ground and air attacks. So I'm mostly just doing normals. It's even worse in the air because I'm limited to just jumping and then hitting my basic attack once or twice before I have to dodge. But eventually it gets there. You'll notice that the game has a couple bugs. One of them is that this boss's health bar disappears when it shouldn't really disappear. So it's a little hard to tell where you are at this stage of the game, just in terms of how close it is to death. So I get a little bit of bad RNG there. As I'm descending from my jump, he throws the ice blast right under my feet, so I don't have any way of dodging it. So I do get caught by that, but it's not terrible. I don't lose too much time there. And finally I knock it into its final stage here. And then I can finish it off with the special. Throws us into a little cutscene here, and we're going to be able to get the Primordial Gem, which is going to give us access to the Void Sword and subsequently the blue magic anytime we need it, which is very useful because blue magic, while in itself isn't always the most useful, it does have two very powerful spells. Well, I shouldn't say that. Three very powerful spells. You're going to see two of them in the run. Mostly there is a third one we use sometimes, but it's normally just shadowed by two of the other blue spells, or some of the spells in the fire section, so the Chaos Claws. So we pick up this gem. We don't technically need it, except the game makes you pick it up. We don't technically need it, of course, because we have all of our void magic already unlocked, but the game makes you pick it up. So we're going to freeze this waterfall here. Now, there is a potential skip on this next part, because once you break this, it's going to let you know of this item here. It's a relic, one of the 4 or 5 items you can use throughout the game. It is possible to skip this by breaking it and then pulling out a bat swarm and then walking slowly, but it saves 0.5 to 1 seconds if done correctly, so it's not worth it, really. Once competition gets down to frames, it'll be worth it, but... so you'll also notice I'm now adding basic attacks to my dashes. Throwing a basic attack with one of the two magical weapons at the end of your dash is the fastest movement in the game here. So we get thrown into this cutscene where our fake, real son is being attacked by some demons here. There are 6 demons in total. You'll notice I'm not using any of the stronger magical spells I was talking about earlier. There's a trick coming up in the next section, which is super important for us to have 2 full bars of blue. So I'm not going to use any here, really, because it's much more important for me to have 2 full bars because than it is to finish these. We'll kill these 5 enemies quickly. The reason is, well, the trick we're going to do is going to save a lot of time, much more than we'd save in this fight here. So it's not even worth it really to consider wasting our blue magic here. We are picking up a little bit, but it's not enough to merit using blue magic here, because we'd be using a lot of blue magic here on this fight, and we want to be as close as 2 bars as possible. So these enemies, they spawn 2 at a time. When you kill one of them, another one will spawn. And then once you've killed 5 of them, the 6th one, once you hit it, it'll pop up behind Trevor, similar to what it's already happened twice. But this time, after you hit it a couple times, it'll just die, and it'll throw you into the next cutscene here, in which you'll be given the Wolf Medallion. So now with the Wolf Medallion, if you go to specific points on the map, in either map, you can go between the real world and the fake world, because that makes so much sense. And I've played this game a lot, I've read up a lot about the story, and I still can't get my head around this scenario here. Like, the story doesn't make sense to me. So as we're stepping through the portal here, the castle's going to make one last attempt to try and stop us. Blood's kind of slowly trickling after us, but it doesn't really do anything. Gabriel looks around here, and he's not really sure what's going on, but he's following the wolf, because why not? As he steps into the real world here, he's going to make a very, very bold statement, which is, I'm back in the real world now. Further proving that I have no idea what's going on in the story, and neither does he. So we're going to see a couple enemies here between here and the next boss. This is one of them. Fortunately, we don't have to fight him. We just freeze him and then go on about our way. So this one here, this is a small animation skip. So normally there's 2 animations here, one for freezing the vent, one for turning into a rat. But if you freeze the vent a little early and then immediately dash into the rat area and turn into a rat, you'll trigger both of them at the same time, but the focus will be on the rat animation, which is very slightly shorter than the vent cutscene. So you actually get to skip a full cutscene and then save a little bit of time on it as well. So here we're navigating this electrical area underneath the building as rats, so we can get in the next section here. And even though it looks like we're supposed to turn into Dracula as soon as we come out here, we're not really supposed to turn into him yet. There's a vent a little farther down here that we're going to turn into. The reason being is we need to get past this Golgoroth guard here, and there's no actual way to get past him right now. If we throw bats at him and then go try to possess him, he'll just kill us when he gets out of bat form, and we can't possess him while he's being distracted by the swarm. So we're going to go over here and we're going to bite the power to the box behind him, which is going to cause a technician to come out to try and repair it. We're also going to do a little bit of a skip here. We're going to return to the checkpoint. As soon as that save bar hits up, it's going to set our checkpoint back to that rat spawn, and we're going to be Dracula instead of in rat form. So we save the entire process of walking back as well as transforming. Transforming probably about as long as it takes to reload that checkpoint, so we basically save all of the time running back. So after we throw that down, we're going to turn into the security guard here, possess him, sorry. We're going to be able to open the door and get into the next area. And this next area is kind of where everything goes wrong for this this world here. There's going to be a lot of problems from here on out. Quick security scan, which is going to be super not relevant in the next 10 seconds. Not really sure this scan's going to be able to do much for people, because in this cutscene here, we enter a lab and find one of Satan's 3 acolytes here. One of the 3 acolytes trying to resurrect Satan. Which I guess I've actually failed to mention up to this point. When we get woken up by Dracula, when we get woken up as Dracula, we get woken up by Zobek. Zobek here is looking to stop the Acolytes of Satan before they wake Satan up here. So he sends us on a mission here to go stop the Acolytes. This is the first Acolyte here, and she kind of poisoned all of the city and turned them into those mutated monsters. So she unleashed that chemical into the city. So now we get into the first fight with her. I don't actually know her name. Basically, just call her Lucy. And at this point here, we need to learn a couple magic spells, which we haven't learned yet. We're going to learn Icy Crest, which is useful if the situation rises. Void Tana, which is a very strong attack here. It does a lot of damage very quickly. And Blizzard. Blizzard you're going to see a couple of times, but we don't really use it to kill things, or to deal damage, that is. Blizzard's a very important spell, because we're actually setting up here to do what's called the Infinite Blizzard glitch. So there's two different kinds of glitches. It's actually, this isn't the first time we could have done the glitch. We could have done it during the cutscene with Trevor. That gives you the bad Blizzard glitch, which means that your blue bar infinitely drains and you can't have blue magic, which means we basically can't progress with that. So instead we wait till this fight here, and we're looking to drop her into a yellow bar here. Once she's at her yellow bar, it basically means the next attack that we do would kill her, unless it's Blizzard, because Blizzard takes a little bit of DOT to do, as it is an AoE attack, so it kind of can persist for a little bit. So we're going to drop her into yellow here, and then we're going to use Blizzard on her. And basically what I'm trying to do here is just damage her with Blizzard without getting tapped out of the animation here. And if you... So, how the glitch works, if you kill an enemy whose death results in a cutscene with Blizzard, you trigger this glitch. You'll see it for a quick second after I pull up out of this cutscene here. You'll see it activated for a second, and then I continue on my way. For whatever reason, when you kill an enemy whose death ends in a cutscene, with Blizzard, it just persists. So right now I have an invisible, constant aura which heals me, freezes enemies, and deals damage. So this is huge, because it's going to let us skip a lot of fights that we really shouldn't be able to skip. It's going to make a lot of fights easier. Boss fights being one of the bigger fights, but it's going to let us skip things that we normally really shouldn't be able to skip, and just, you know, help us out in general. So here we're in, again back in the fake world. Zobek, we have captured the first Acolyte, of course, after that fight, and Zobek's questioning her about the location of the other two Acolytes, what their plans are, how far they are, and so on. So, the nice thing about the Blizzard glitch here, there's actually a decent amount of places you can get it here. Most bosses you can get it off of. This is actually another fight you can get it off of if you missed it during the Lucy fight. Again, any fight that ends in a cutscene. This fight just, of course, is a little harder without Infinite Blizzard and having to do it properly. Especially when you don't have the Chaos Claws, because those are armored enemies, so you have to hit them in a very certain way. So right here I'm trying the animation glitch. Didn't work the first couple of times, so I just did it the correct way. The somersault animation cancel is actually pretty finicky to do. And like I said, there are some places where it is worth it, some places where it's not, and some places it just doesn't work really, well, without crashing the game. This one would have been faster, but again, very finicky. So we're going to do a little bit of platforming here through the underneath of this fake Castlevania here. We're going to go on our way to our next boss. So at this point in the game, we have not a lot of our powers. We have our Void Sword, and that's about it. Story-wise, again, not a lot of sense here. I guess I can talk a little bit about why we're helping Zobek specifically. Zobek, my timing on this is impeccable. This is actually one of the fights that we can skip entirely because of the Blizzard fight. We can just jump up here after freezing them. I guess I'll save my little bit of story for after this cutscene here. So this here is the Chupacabra here. He is... you played the first game, the Chupacabras were a huge hassle. They took a lot of your stuff. They were a huge annoyance. This game, they're a pretty big help. This is me trying the somersault glitch and just failing it until eventually I just give up and do it correctly. So the Chupacabra here is actually going to be a big help in a casual run. This is one-time help in the speed run. He does give you a very powerful item, but basically he's been trapped in here by Medusa, so we got to get him out. So this here is a nice little skip, as long as you can get the height on it. So you're supposed to be able to, or you're supposed to move all the light bridges across here, so you can get from one area to the other. But if you get the maximum height on your jump and then end it with a wide attack, you can actually make it over, no problem. The problem is getting the height, because it actually stops your horizontal movement as soon as you get to the edge. So you have to jump right at the last second there, and then get your full height, followed by the attack, followed by the dash to make it across that second platform. But after that, you activate the switch, which lowers the Chupacabra here, and then you can go back and move the light bridges so that you enter, or put him into the device, which will unlock the prison. After that, we're gonna go fight Medusa, which will be a little bit after. And then we'll see the Chupacabra a little bit after that. So the reason we're helping Zobek here, Zobek awakens us, lets us know that Satan is being revived, and he has a couple acolytes that are trying to revive him, which is obviously bad for Zobek, because Zobek wants to rule the world, but he can't really do that if Satan's going to do that. So he doesn't want Satan to succeed, of course. He knows that he isn't strong enough to defeat Satan, and that the only person who is strong enough to defeat Satan is Gabriel Belmont Dracula. Real quick, this is an instance of the somersault glitch, which doesn't help at all. You skip the animation, which would normally be present there, and activating it, but they still don't move into place until they normally would have, so you can't make it across any quicker. So Zobek, going back to it, Zobek obviously doesn't want Satan to succeed, knows that Dracula, Gabriel, is the only person strong enough to defeat him, even though Gabriel hates Zobek. He finds one bargaining piece that will seal the deal. Gabriel, at this point, he's been alive for almost a century at this point, went from being the pinnacle of righteousness, goodness, and the champion of the Brotherhood of Light to the most evil, destructive force in existence. And he's lost everybody that's precious to him, basically, and he doesn't want to continue. This is a nice skip here. If you get in the right position and you get the full full height on your jump, has the harpies coming in to hit you, it'll knock you up on that ledge. It actually saves about 2.5 minutes. So Zobek gets the final piece, which will seal the deal, which is he went into the alternate dimension and he picked up the vampire killer. Again, the only thing that can grant Dracula his eternal slumber, which he so desires. So in reward for defeating Satan, or helping Zobek defeat Satan, Zobek will deliver the blow which will give Dracula the eternal slumber he desires. So here we are. This is the Medusa fight, the 3 Gorgons. Medusa... so you meet up with the other 2 Gorgons, Medusa's sisters, and they're on your side, but Medusa isn't all about that. and brainwashes them into helping her. Again, we do have the Infinite Blizzard glitch here. You'll notice I ran to the corner there to do that. The blue magic, the Infinite Blizzard glitch, will block out the armor breaking property of your Chaos Claws. So if you don't do it in there's 2 or 3 spots you can do it, but if you don't do it in the correct spots, it'll just cancel out your Chaos magic, and you won't be able to break through the barrier. But so here we're standing, or we're jumping in the air, of course, because that's basically the only way to hit her. And we're doing some basic attacks here, and every time she gets in range of Blizzard, she's getting knocked into like a stun phase or a damaged phase. So she's doing attacks a lot less frequently than she should. She's moving around a lot less. So every boss in this game basically has 3 cycles. Once you get the first cycle down, they'll do something, and then you'll go into the second phase, and so on and so forth. It's very important to note on these cycles here, when you have to climb up on the arm to get to one of the heads. Normally, when you're moving up grapple points like that, you'll see that all of the points are highlighted because so there's 2 different types of moving. Basically, there's basically just up and down, left, right, crawling, or there's jumping, which means you can jump past a point, and it's a lot faster to do that. When you're on the arm, Medusa and the Gorgons, they're not in a state where they should be able to take damage, so taking damage from the Infinite Blizzard really bugs out the arms, and if you do damage and jump on the arm there's a high chance that you will just get knocked into the void. You'll have to restart the fight at the beginning, and most importantly, you'll lose the Infinite Blizzard glitch. The Infinite Blizzard glitch goes away on game close or reset or returning to a checkpoint. So basically, anytime this exact playthrough finishes, you lose the Infinite Blizzard glitch. So it's really important that you don't lose it before the time. There are a couple or places in this run where we do intentionally lose the Blizzard glitch because stealth sections are a thing, and if we bring the Infinite Blizzard glitch into the stealth sections, we will straight up just crash the game. So this one here, this is where it's really dangerous to have or be jumping up. As you can see, I was actually off a little bit there. That's usually the area where it happens, just because it's at an angle, so that the game assumes since that it's taking damage, you're supposed to be on flat ground. So it takes the collision of that arm, which is at an angle, and says, yeah, you're supposed to be standing on this, but there's actually no collision there, so you just fall. So most bosses in this game don't really have a quick kill. Fortunately, this one here, they actually built it into the game. So this is the 3rd cycle. If you miss this quick kill, you have to go through a real 3rd cycle. But fortunately, Medusa's nice here and starts inhaling here. And if you land that void shot, it instantly wipes the 3rd phase, which is really nice. So now we can pick up the 2nd gem for the Chaos Claws. And we now have fire, we have the Chaos Claws, and we have the explosive Shadow Dagger, which will let us cause a little bit of explosive damage here. Basically, blow things up that are getting in our way. So now we're gonna go meet up with the Chupacabra we talked about earlier. We're also gonna refresh our magic here at the mana font. So you'll notice that I'm toggling between getting one magic instead of doing both at the same time. It actually goes a lot slower if you do both at the same time instead of just going one at a time. So that's why I do that. So you notice for some jumps like this, I actually get out of the Void Sword and go to the regular whip. You get a little bit more distance on the whip. As we're crossing the bridge here, we're getting into another fight here. But this time we have the Chaos Claws, so it's going to be a little bit easier because we don't have to worry about dealing damage to the front there. Actually gonna opt to just do the Chaos Whip here. Save a little bit of the magic. The fire magic is going to be important later on in the next fight, whereas the blue magic isn't as important for this next fight. And then I'm gonna learn a couple of the important fire moves here. So this one's very important for one boss in particular, but just in general, doing a lot of damage over time. This one's just a very good combo move. Then they're going to do a I'm going to do a fourth one here, or a third one rather. A little later on, it's not necessary now, but a little later on, I'm going to learn the third ability there, which is going to be used in specifically just one fight, actually. So the reason we fought this fight here is because we need the dungeon key, of course. Unfortunately, the shop that sells them isn't until after this, so we aren't able to get it. So if you notice here, this cutscene's a little whacked out. It's because of the blizzard glitch. It kind of turns the camera angle somewhere you're not really used to it. So I go for the somersault glitch here, and I just kind of mess up a little bit. So I just go for it regularly. So we're coming up on the Chupacabra shop here, which is going to be right before our voyage back into the real world. So we get this nice little cutscene here. Chupacabra showed up at a shop for us. He's going to sell us a bunch of cool things, yada yada yada. We're going to pick up a couple important items. Seal of Alistair isn't super important, but it can help with a little bit of damage. The important items are the Ensnared Dragon here, which allow us to have full unlimited magic for 45 seconds. It's going to help with a couple bosses later on. The other things are kind of just backup in case something were to go wrong. And the important thing here actually is that on our way out, the Chupacabra gives you a Talisman of the Dragon for free as soon as you're walking out. Now, the Talisman of the Dragon is a very powerful item. It's a one-use only item, and it'll either clear the screen of all regular creatures, or it'll take away a full health bar. So basically, one shot a cycle of any boss. So we're going to use that in the final fight because it's the only late game, one of the only late games fights we don't have Blizzard for, and one of the harder, realistically, because the Grim Reaper Death Zobek just kind of stands in one place, whereas Satan does not. So we're back in the real world here, and we're going to take a quick little detour into Zobek's establishment, his corporation building here, to talk about the information he learned. Quick little cutscene, and he'll let us know. Excuse me. And give us the rundown on what he got, and we're gonna head off to another portion of the city here. So we're gonna have to. It's a pretty long trek here. Unfortunately, the map is pretty big, which is nice. Except that there's nothing really relevant in the overworld. I should say the overworld, the real world. A lot of it's just moving from one area to the next. And it's overly large, unfortunately. Which is perfect in a casual playthrough, but in a speed run, it's a lot of dashing around for not a lot of reward. So we're gonna get out of the garage here, and we're gonna head out into our first look at what outside looks since the infection or the disease has spread. So there's not a lot of civilians walking around the streets anymore like we saw at the very beginning of the game. No, it's just infected creatures. Well, for now it's actually just infected creatures. Then a little bit we'll see the riot police come out and get into fights with these creatures. But for now, it's just these infected individuals who have been mutated. I guess I shouldn't say infected. I should really say just mutated. So we're going to enter a stealth section here, which isn't really a stealth section, it's just an excuse to turn you into a rat and make you crawl through a pipe so that you can come out somewhere else. Like I said, I've already said this, I'm not super fond of the rat sections. I think the rat section's really not necessary. But we're going to come out here, and this is right before the next kind of major area here. We're just going to dash past all the enemies and freeze them so that we can proceed without actually having to deal with them. You got to throw throw a dagger at the electrical box there, just so that we don't get electrocuted on our way up, and then we can be on our way. There's this one. Basically, it's pretty easy to dodge a ranged ability from one character. More or less, if they're too close to you, then they'll just hit you. And basically, what happened there is I froze one, and then the first person who I froze unthawed and hit me at just the last second, basically. But eventually, I was able to get up, no problem. So we're entering the next area here, and unfortunately the door to where we want to go is locked, so we have to go through this complex here and flip some switches on the generator so we can actually go to where we want to go here. Again, we're going to have to use the rat mechanic to basically just go somewhere where they don't want us walking. So we're going to turn around into a rat, and we're going to drop down to the section below us. And then we're just going to run past the enemies there because we don't really care about them. So you'll notice there that the creature actually attacked the other rats there. If you'll notice, I have a number when I'm in rat form, and that's just how many rats I have in that specific swarm. If I run out of all the rats, I game over because it represents all my lives. So these two creatures here pop up there, and they're actually pretty strong enemies. It's really fortunate we don't have to fight them because we can just perma-freeze them, because they would knock us out of these animations pretty handily. So we just got to get rid of them by freezing them, and then we can do our two animations here and then take off without any issue. So flipping the generator there, flipping the switch. Oh, excuse me. And then we can be on our way to our real goal, which is the train station. We're gonna take a train station, which is gonna bypass most of the security for this company, which doesn't want us meddling around. The company, sorry, being the one that spread the disease. Don't really want us snooping around, so we're gonna have to go the long way here. So as soon as we come out here, gonna be faced with a couple enemies that actually take a little bit to come out, but we can't go anywhere without dealing with them. So we're gonna fight a couple of them, and then the riot police are gonna show up. They don't really know what we are, so they assume we're hostile since most everything else can't survive against these creatures. So they're gonna attack us, and then we're gonna make quick work of them, and we're gonna be on our merry way. Get this quick little cutscene here, and then the riot police show up. So again, these are armored enemies. These three grunts are actually usually pretty easy to deal with, since their shields are only on their arms, so they have to go into a guard position instead of the enemies from earlier, which just have armor on their front or back, depending on whether or not it's a smaller, larger creature. So we go through that here, and we're going to go into this next area. So this here is actually one of the easiest loads to do it. I've done it a couple times now. There are other places you can do it. It's a little harder to do. But if I were to go up to this door here and just air dash against it, directly in the middle, at the right time, I would actually just fall out of the world. And that would be it. Of course, I don't want to do that there, because it actually has no benefit, since it literally just brings me into the abyss with an unloaded map. But it is possible. There are some places where it is useful, or it can be useful. It's actually very, very hard to do in most places. That one there is pretty easy to do it in, but you have to hit a very specific frame, both on the door you're trying to skip, as well as the frame in the timing. And most places don't save too much time. So again, we skip that fight by just freezing them and then jumping away. Then we're gonna have to run through the unconstructed tunnels of this facility. You can see there's a little bit of damage here. The room itself got damaged, and so everything kind of froze over. I'm just kind of dashing in the corner, waiting for the door to open. As you can see here, this area is very, very not safe to work in. Still in construction, of course. You can see all the rails that haven't quite been installed, all the holes in the floor. Even though it does look like there are some scientists in here. Just a little differently than construction workers would be. So we're gonna have to parkour our way up this electrical minefield, I guess you could say. Little sparks flying left and right here. Fortunately, there's not a lot going on here, not a lot of action, and not really much story left to talk about. I've covered the past two games. Covered everything pretty far up to this point. So I tried to do a dash followed by a aerial attack here, and I missed, so I just kind of reset here. Fortunately, I'm just on the lap platform, so it's nothing too bad. Until I land back down here. This is a little bit of an unfortunate part. I screwed up here and just have to redo the entire section. I couldn't, like, the game wouldn't register the grapple points, so it just kind of let me drop. It is good and bad about the game. The detection on grapples are sometimes a little hard to get. Collision in this game is a little weird, so sometimes it's really good for us and sometimes it's not. You'll actually notice that you can't even get to that platform where I was at normally. I was actually jumping at the back of the platform the last time. So now that we got out of there, we can climb up no problem. And now you'll notice that the infected creatures are now fighting the riot police. You'll actually notice that there's a lot of damage here as well. Roads collapsed and everything. A lot of explosions and everything. Really, Castlevania City is just not a safe place to be right now. We're going to get over here and destroy these two chains which are keeping the store open. And we're going to head into the next area here, which is where we're going to drop our blizzard. There's not another fight between here and the stealth section, so we don't need it anymore. We're keeping it around because there's a faster checkpoint to get rid of it at. And so here is the container skip. This is the first point where we find out that console would actually be faster in this area. So there are two skips here. I'm doing the slower of the two, because it's the only version that's actually possible to do on PC. There are two tricks in the game which cannot be done on PC, but can only be done on console. One of them is the infinite hover glitch, which would be helpful here. The infinite hover glitch basically involves jumping in the air and there's a couple different methods, but basically it abuses some air animations, which would cause Dracula to basically hover infinitely. So we would use that instead of jumping, instead of hanging onto the front of the container like we did. We would jump off the back, infinite hover until the next one showed up underneath us, and then we would run off the back and land at the platform where we did. Unfortunately, Infinite Blizzard Infinite hover doesn't work in here, so we aren't able to do it. We reset the checkpoint here, like I said, to get rid of the Infinite Blizzard here. And then we get into the self section here. There was a second glitch I was talking about earlier that doesn't work in PC. We'll go over that a little later on in the area where it wouldn't be relevant. But the other one that doesn't work is the infinite long jump. It was really a bunch of names for it because it's one trick that's just combined in all of these different glitches. But essentially, the way one of the abilities works just doesn't allow the tricks to be done. So this stealth section here, kind of similar to the other ones. But we're going to get a nice little, not trick, but a nice switch up here, where the guard that we thought we got past actually comes in. So we have to stay up here out of his sight before we possess him. Now, we could just jump down and possess him right now, but we actually move slower when we're possessing him than he moves by himself. So we're going to wait till he gets all the way to the left, right in front of the scanner where we want him. Before we jump down, and then we're going to go possess them from there. Going to save a little bit of time so we don't have to walk and stumble around and all that. As soon as we possess him here, we're going to open the door, and then we're going to run back to the rat spot, which you may or may not have used earlier. And then we're going to finally get into the train. So the train's a lot of very interesting sections. Some of them are very unintuitive, some of them are kind of pointless, some of them are just there as filler. So we're going to switch into the rats here. We're going to pass the Golgoroth guards here. We're going to sneak on the train. Turns out we're not that stealthy though. As soon as we get on the train here, the Golgoroth guards are gonna hear us. Well, sorry, not as soon as we get on, but as soon as we transform, Golgoroth guards are gonna notice something and step on the train as soon as it leaves. So train takes off with us aboard, and there's actually some of the devil's spawns here as well. So we're going to fight this Satan spawn a couple of times here. This one here just takes a couple of hits and then we can progress to the next area here. As soon as we get the execute feed there, we get into the next area here. So a lot of these areas, again, like I said, Goldigorth guards are invincible, so it's mostly just running away here, either by evading outside of the train or inside the train. We run to the back of the cart to trigger jumping to the next one. Again, where the Satan spawn is, but we don't actually care about him. The only important thing here is distracting the guard from blowing that portion of the train off while we're on it. It does buckle eventually, but we get on to the next train cart, so we don't care. This train here is slowly getting destroyed over time. But fortunately, we're able to get to the next cart very quickly here. And as you could expect from any game or movie which involves the top of a train, signs are coming up, so you have to get in here. So this part is very unintuitive, I find. It took me like probably 10 tries originally to figure out what I'm supposed to do. Because you have this Golgoroth guard here who's going to kill you, you assume, if you let him get to you. He's just walking at you, so you assume you're supposed to bat him or something. So here I actually, I inputted the B. I put in the B input, but it just didn't accept the input. It wouldn't let me possess him, so it just threw me in front of him here, so I have to redo it, unfortunately. But yeah, it's the first time I did it, I assumed that, you know, if I let him get too close to me, he was gonna force me to restart the checkpoint, and so I kept throwing bats at him, trying to get around him, doing all sorts of things, and I couldn't figure it out, and then eventually, I think I actually had to look it up, but eventually you find out that he just stops conveniently right in front of you for whatever reason, even though, you know, it's an empty cart, so he doesn't really have a reason to walk all the way over there if he's not going to check there, but, you know, that's not on me. So this fight here is actually the most unimportant fight of this entire ride, or most unimportant sequence here. We're really just using it to try and get some magic in our bars here, because this is a completely timed event. If we go stand in the corner, it's going to take exactly the same amount of time. Excuse me, sorry. So this event's only going to as soon as we get inside this tunnel here. And he actually throwing up a lot of blocks, the AI was, so I eventually just stopped trying to go for the bar. So this section here, we're going to get on top of the chain, and we're going to enter the second final phase, which is dodging the signs from earlier. So we jump onto this section here, and then conveniently the signs are only in only in 2 or 3 places, so we have one area we can get out of the way. Actually, it doesn't matter if you get hit here, as long as you don't die, but we have enough health bar that it doesn't matter how long or how many times we get hit. Of course, the game wants you to not take any hits at all, but you know, that's not important. So once we skip a couple of them, we're going to get thrown into the final fight here. So it's important to note that if you tried an aerial attack there, or you're standing on the ground in one spot when he comes to get you, you'll actually get pinned into an attack, or he'll pin you into an attack there, which will waste a lot of time. So instead, you just be on the move, dashing constantly, and then he can't pin you down. And then you can throw down an explosive earthquake and then just one-shot him. So now we've met up with Zobek's lieutenant here. He's been sent by Zobek to ensure that our mission is successful. So he's going to escort us or come with us and help us on our journey. Long story about the lieutenant. Turns out Zobek's lieutenant isn't actually Zobek's lieutenant. So, way back at the beginning of the game, I was talking about how there was that cutscene that we get back to right at the end of the prologue fight, the explosion and everything. So there's a little bit of things that actually happen there that we don't actually find out about until the second last fight of the game, really. Turns out that Alucard is a man with a plan. Alucard comes up with a plan to get revenge on Zobek and Satan in one fell swoop. Comes up with this dastardly plan to use his own father as bait. So he's talking with his father, and he describes this plan where Dracula, Gabriel, his father, falls into this deep slumber and loses all of his powers, and Satan, sensing this, calls to his followers to reawaken him. Zobek, knowing that he wouldn't be able to defeat Satan by himself, would call Dracula to help him, and then offer that deal. So this is similar to the Harpy fight earlier. If we stand in the right spot and get hit at the right area, we can skip that entire fight there, which is also important because we skip a pretty long interaction with Zobek there, where we have to basically just throw him up a notch on the wall, then he throws us up, and then we throw him over a wall so that he can open a switch. We're going to skip all of that, though. So Alucard comes up with this idea. Once Dracula falls into this slumber, they'll seek him for help, and then afterwards they can eliminate both of them together. So Alucard stabs Dracula with his Miramana, so that he has no memories of this, so that Zobek can't read his mind to figure it out. And then here we are back in the fake Castlevania. We followed Trevor back into here. Now we're gonna fight these two creatures. These two creatures are pretty annoying to deal with, because they're going to fall back into these little shadow pools here, which if you don't kill quickly is just going to turn into another enemy. So you'll see me completely switch focus off of the one who's still alive, so I can focus on dealing with the shadow pool before it shows up. Using all of my magic here, which is absolutely worth it. We're going to enter a next little cutscene here with Camille. So if you'll notice, my health bar actually turned purple. So for whatever reason, this is again making less and less sense. Camille, who we knew for all of 10 minutes, or we as in Gabriel knew for all of 10 minutes, is for some reason portrayed as somebody that Gabriel knew very well, for one, and for two, trying to romance him despite Dracula having a wife who we just saw who is also alive for some reason. So that doesn't make any sense. But Camille poisons us, so we have to drink our wife's blood, which will fight off the toxins for a little bit until we can finally vanquish Camille and eliminate the toxin for good. All super, it all makes sense. So you'll notice we're out of red magic here, which is a little unfortunate, but it's not too big of a deal. We're gonna have to fight the minions a little bit to get a little bit of red magic. Unfortunately, Camille here does require a little bit of red magic to start the fight off, because she has a blue barrier. So this cutscene here is a little bit of RNG. There are two Maries, one is the real one is the fake one. We have to pick the right one and consume her blood so that we don't immediately die. It's completely random which one is the real one, and if we pick the fake one, we have to restart from that checkpoint. So like I said, I don't have any red magic, so I'm just kind of doing nothing until her spawns pop up. I'm going to get some red bar here, and then I'm going to be able to break through. So you notice I'm using the guillotine move, so I'm or raise in the air into guillotine, so I'm knocking them in the air so I can dodge the attacks. So I'm going to have to do this twice here, breaking 2 different shields, but after that we're going to be able to do the fight pretty quickly. So Camille has a couple interesting phases. They're actually some of the harder ones to deal with without using some of the overpowered skills. But once you realize how easy it is, it makes it really easy, especially with an ensnared demon. So this first fight is same as really any fight. Just freeze her so she stands in place, because she likes to teleport away as soon as you get close to her. So you teleport her so she stays in place, and then you just use a Void Tana, knock her into her second phase here. So her second phase here, we're going to throw up an ensnared demon, which is the item which gives us magic for 45 seconds. And then we're going to abuse Avalanche here. Or not Avalanche, Explosive Earthquake. So there's a bunch of different ones of her, and she's just kind of standing in an area, and you have to hit the right one to actually do damage to her. But if you do Explosive Earthquake, you can hit all of them at once and drop her health bar really quickly. So then after that, you are grabbed by some evil magic, and you have to mist form out of it. And then we can quickly do that, and then drop Explosive Earthquake until her health bar is empty. I very briefly tried, just out of habit, tried to drop her to yellow so I could pop up Infinite Blizzard, because in the old route you do bring up Infinite Blizzard there, but there's not actually really a point in bringing up an Infinite Blizzard, because you do have to drop it very shortly after this. So out of habit I tried to get Infinite Blizzard off of her, but then I realized that there wasn't a point. So now we have Mist Form. Mist Form is going to allow us to get through areas that we wouldn't normally be able to get through, and also use the magic of fans to propel us a little bit. So we're going to fill up our full bar here, and then we're going to head into an area that has actually some pretty interesting skips. Once we get past a little bit of combat here. So again, the game trying to make us overly use the ability we just got. So those are some spike traps. If you get hit by them, you just kind of get impaled and stuck in place for about 8 seconds. It's kind of like a snare. You want to try and avoid as much as possible. So right here, there is a very, very small area where you can jump over and use Mist to get a little bit of extra height. You can use Mist to kind of force your way over that last couple of frames. The other way is just to get hit by an ability at this exact time. So I'm waiting for basically a bullet to hit me or to try and get up. There is another way to get up, which would be faster if I cleared the enemies, but clearing enemies isn't fast, so I don't want to do that. I unfortunately get snared here, so I'm stuck for about 8 seconds. Eventually, things just aren't going my way, so I just try for it. And I actually, since I lured all of the enemies together, they're actually focusing on themselves, so I don't have to worry about getting hit. I do, unfortunately, lose just a little bit of time because they weren't cooperating. But now we're heading to an area that actually has some pretty cool skips, and it's actually really, really fast, this kind of skips that you can get here. So this area here that we're entering is actually a really, really long area. Multiple floors, you have to turn the power on and off a couple times, navigate some elevators, fight a bunch of enemies here. But fortunately there is a nice little skip you can do here. It's going to use maximum height as well as guillotine. This is This is the safer version of this shot. There is a more dangerous version. This one here is just using collisions off of railings and the mist form to force yourself just above the hit zone, so you force yourself up. And then we can jump up without any problems here. Skipped probably about 15 minutes of gameplay here, and we can go right into the next area. So this is a pretty long, unnecessary stealth scene, unfortunately. We're going to turn into rat form here just to get to the other side. But there's no way to actually catch the first cycle of Scientist that pops up on the other side, which means we have to wait for a full cycle of the Scientist. And you'll see as we turn into this other area here. But a full cycle for the Scientist is coming out of this door here, which involves about 15 seconds of actually, spawning in. Some doors opening on the other side. The chemical shower that we saw from earlier, that we've seen in every door we've tried to go through, and then him slowly walking out. So we had to wait for the one that was on screen when we came in to finish his walk to the door. He does something on the other side of the door to the other scientists, and then he walks out of a third door, and then finally once that scientist is out of that door, he can spawn into this door here, which is going to take again 10-15 seconds, so we can actually get in, which is just a lot of wasted time, really. Unfortunately the cycle can't be skipped, so we just have to wait for this guy. As soon as this guy gets out, though, we turn into, possess him, and then we can sneak into the next boss here. So as soon as we get into here, we grab the antidote, which is going to stop all of the toxins that have been produced to the world, and then we're going to get rudely interrupted back at Zobek's lair. We're going to get attacked by Lucy again. She is broken free of the confines, and we have to defeat her. She's actually drug us to... Sorry, she hasn't drug us. Zobek kind of ports you both to a separate area, kind of keeps you confined so that she can't leave, she can't escape, and she can't cause any more damage. So we're going to get into this fight here. We're going to use all of our magic. We're going to go into a second stage here in just a second, where she flies away and deals a bunch of range damage, and just kind of shoot a couple shots at her and wait. She'll come back down shortly, and then we can finish her up pretty quickly with our magic. Then we're going to go for the Infinite Blizzard glitch here. We do run out here, so I'm going to drop another ensnared demon here. Because getting this Blizzard glitch is obviously really important here. Unfortunately, we accidentally used the extra ensnared demon here. But we eventually get the Blizzard glitch, so in the end it is worth it here. Wasting the extra ensnared demon because we don't switch to the other... back to the other slab weapon is a little unfortunate, but overall it's not too big of a deal. You still get a decent amount of magic during the other fight we would use this in, so it doesn't waste as much time as it could in some other fights. So this one here is actually another pretty big skip. This is called the Overlook skip, of course, because we're in the Overlook Tower. We're actually going to skip the Overlook skip here, just because it is very frame perfect. But there's a skip that is possible here that would skip this entire fight, basically. The reason we're skipping it is because we have the Infinite Blizzard glitch, so it's a lot safer in a marathon environment. Just because with the Infinite Blizzard glitch, we can just freeze them and pop this open. So it's about 20 seconds slower than the alternative, but it is a lot safer, just because of all the frame perfect nature of it. So right here we're actually getting into basically kind of a boss rush in the sense that we're going to fight a couple bosses very, very quickly with not a lot of even in the casual playthrough, there's not really a lot of battles between these bosses, just a lot of distance, really. So this first fight here is going to be against Argus, who is... so in the first in the first game, one of the creatures we encountered was Pan. Pan, a very big mythology. Pan was actually on our side. But in order to get to where we needed, Pan, for various reasons, we don't really need to get into it, but Pan needed to sacrifice himself in order to give us the ability to be able to get where we needed to quickly. He kind of tricks us into fighting him. He acts aggro, kind of attacks us, acts all evil, and then only at the end reveals that he was sacrificing himself to give you a helping hand. So this is another stealth section. Argus here is very angry at us. He's kind of guarding this area here. So how you're really supposed to do this is you're supposed to avoid the grassy areas and then distract him by pinging a bell. But since we have movement that beats him out here, we basically draw his attention with one bell. So he's out on the left side of us. And then we run all the way to the switch and then to the end goal before he can catch up to us. I'm going to pick up some magic here since we ran out of it after the last fight. Then we're going to head into this fight with Infinite Blizzard on, of course. And going to make quick work of him. Again, having Infinite Blizzard is very strong, and there's not really much some of these bosses can do. Pan is one of the first ones we'll see that gets basically permafrozen. He does have a little bit that he can work with to get out, but he doesn't have a lot in terms of defense against permanent freezing, as you can expect. So we turned this creature here into a chicken dinner. It's a different video game that I normally prefer my chicken dinners in, but had to put that game aside for a little bit here. So we get the Mirror of Faith off of that bird, and now we're going to fight against Argus here. So I'm just looking to get into his range here to freeze him. Then I'm going to take a little bit of step back so I can get a Void Tana up, and then throw him into his first cycle here. Into his second cycle. Then again, I'm going to get a little bit of freezing in on him. I'm going to use Explosive Earthquake to knock him down to his final state here, which is just dead. So we get this nice little cutscene here. Again, unskippable, unfortunately. Some cutscenes just aren't skippable, some of them are, so we get this cutscene here. And then we can move along on our way. After this here, we're basically just going right into the next one. There's not really any combat between here and them, but there is another kind of puzzle area to kind of make it look like there's a little bit of sustenance between this boss fight and the next fight. So we're going to leave this area of the castle. We're going to go back, talk to Trevor a little bit, and he's going to tell us where we want to go next. So basically we're picking up all of the pieces of the Mirror of Fate. Mirror of Fate, of course, is a mirror that has magical properties and doesn't really make too much sense. It does a lot of different things. Did a lot of things in Mirrors of Fate, or Mirror of Fate, but doesn't really do anything in this game, aside from open a couple of doors. That's really all it does in this game. So we're now entering the Toy Maker's Fair. The Toy Maker has a very tragic story here. Well, in the game in general. Which is that he was basically tricked into coming to the castle here. And from there he was kind of enslaved. Eventually he goes insane and just starts making evil contraptions, evil toys really, that attack you. He's a lot more prominent. He has a lot more prominent role in Mirror of Fate. In this game, he really only serves the purpose of this area here, and then you don't really get much from him from here on out. So again, this is another rat section. There's no power to this area, so we need to turn to a rat here in order to set power. Gonna run into a different area here. Using the rats, of course. That was gonna be a nice magic font down here, so we can play in some magic. Which is really just here so that you don't have to backtrack a long ways. Because fortunately they're nice enough to put a magic font right where you would need magic. Also, since you kind of do get trapped in here if you don't have magic, they kind of decided that it was a good idea to give it to you. Which is nice because it means we don't have to go open the other magic font, which is a little out of the way for us. So we're going to fill up on magic here. Restart the generator by knocking all of the rubble out of it. This generator furnace thing. As soon as we ignite it, we're going to switch back into a rat here. And then we're going to navigate some of the unfortunate machinery of this area that's now been reborn after this little trip. Again, we have 9 lives as the rats, so it's not the end of the world if we do get hit, but the patterns are pretty easy, so normally if you're patient you don't get hit, unless you try to get very close a little early on, too early on like I just did there. Once you get past here, you lose the rat here, which is game mechanic. The bag crushes the rat, you just switch to the next one, and everything's turned off. So we can run all the way back to our last point and turn back into Gabriel, and then go on to the next portion of the game, which is a way they kind of try and force you into learning a little bit about the toy maker. It's a interesting little, I guess, mini game. I guess it's kind of not interesting when you're skipping all the cutscenes because you're missing really the entire point of it. But the toy maker comes out and not the toy maker. Originally, one of the toy maker's puppets is going to come out here and try to explain to you the story of the toy maker. So you had to jump into this device here, and this toy maker's puppet, they're going to narrate a little bit about the toy maker's life, and you have to select the correct puppets and collect background, which is of course always going to be the same every time. As soon as he starts talking, you can skip the cutscene in the next order, but really you're skipping a lot of the story. Again, the story is basically the toy maker is a very good toy maker. The original owner of the castle, Walter Bernard, tricks him into going to work at the castle for him. He gets enslaved, and yeah, that's about it. There's a dragon for some reason. And then yeah, he gets enslaved and makes evil toys for Walter's own sinister plans. After that, we go grab next piece of the mirror here. Well, not quite. We grab the toy maker's heart and return it to the toy maker, but then he immediately gets possessed by the blood of the house and starts to fight against us. There's a couple giant puppet props that we have to fight here, but we have a lot of magic, so it's not a big deal. We also have Infinite Blizzard, which is important to note. Infinite Blizzard here, very, very fortunately, Infinite Blizzard does damage. This fight here is possible to soft lock. More or less. It fortunately doesn't quite soft lock, but it does really slow down the fight. If you when the toy maker is in the giant mech, if you get grabbed by him, he's not supposed to take any damage, of course. Kind of like this. Fortunately, we were able to get out just in time. Just again, Blizzard does a lot of weird things to hitboxes when it's not supposed to take damage. In that particular instance, I was able to break out of the grab before the game kind of froze because the hitbox didn't really know what to do. But there are some scenarios where it'll just freeze and everything will be stuck, but since his damage bar or health bar is going down due to the Infinite Blizzard, eventually you get out of the soft block and it's not as bad. Just takes a lot of time away out of the fight. So we're in the last phase here, just keeping him down. As soon as that happens, we actually knock the castle's blood out of him and he returns to his normal self. He gives us the piece in the mirror that we needed, and then we can take off and go on to the next part here. So we've got all the pieces in the mirror we need. We're going to go back to the real world. And we're going to encounter the newest main character and the newest plot hole of this game. I'm going to dash by these enemies, of course, we don't care about them. Those enemies, interestingly enough, warriors of the Brotherhood of Light, for some reason showing up in the castle. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but, you know, whatever. So, flashback to the real world. Get knocked out of our daydreaming or whatever. Don't really know what to call it. And we're back at Zobek's headquarters there. This area might look familiar. We've come by here already. Fortunately, we don't have to do the prep on all the pipes. We can just leave, no problem. Again, enemies in the tunnel, just run by, no problem. So we're going to enter another area of the city we haven't seen before. It's going to take a little bit of travel to get there, same as always. This time, instead of going straight here, we're going to go through the right to an area previously that we couldn't access because we didn't have mist, of course. So we're going to dash through the rubble here. So at this point in the game, we have located the second acolyte. Sort of. We've tracked his location to a certain portion of the town, but that's the best we can do. So we're going to head over and try to investigate. And see what leads we can pick up while Zobek does whatever it is he's doing to try and get any leads he can. Zobek, being a necromancer and almost omnipotent being, for some reason just can't figure out where some dude using magic is. Very helpful to our cause, Zobek. Ooh. So we're going into a kind of a mini boss here. They kind of bring out a giant mech here with 2 health bars. The giant mech is a little bit of a pain because we had to break the face mask before we can do anything, which once frozen with the Infinite Blizzard, again, Infinite Blizzard, such a weird glitch, game kind of gives him some hitboxes he shouldn't have, and some hitboxes he should have don't work. Eventually we get him down to the second health bar here. Ooh, excuse me. Then we're able to drop him a little bit more. We're also going to be able to pick up a little bit of red bar here, which is important. Then get rid of these two guys while we wait. Once we deliver the finishing blow here, it'll give us another cutscene here and we'll be able to progress a little bit. So one important thing that it kind of skips there is this hooded figure kind of shows up, and then he kind of takes off very mysteriously. So now we got to figure out who this is. So we kind of have a little bit of a path that he is leaving for us here, which I don't know how we sense. It seems like a weird trail to be able to follow, just this purple line. But we, you know, somehow can track it. So we're going to follow this guy's path, which is basically still across town. Now, I mentioned a purple line. It hasn't shown up quite yet. We have to get into the area for it to show up. And even then, it only shows up from time to time. I assume that the purple line is not canon and it's just there as a visual to help the player out. But I don't really have evidence to prove that. And a lot of things would suggest that it's actually just canon. So you can see the purple line right there, suggesting that we jump up here. Fortunately, everybody's frozen down there, so we can just jump up real quick without having to deal with them. So we clear these enemies really quickly so they don't interfere with us jumping. And then we get onto these platforms here. These platforms, similar to earlier, have a pretty weird movement and mechanics. So we're going to try a trick here. It's actually a pretty difficult trick to get off here. So once we miss it the first time, it's not super worth going for again. This trick here does save a decent amount of time, but again, a lot of frames are required to get this in perfectly. So we're going to go for it a second time here. Basically the trick here is you got to get on the right side of this ledge with your jump and the momentum off of the platform that you're not really supposed to be able to get. Then you have to get a second very difficult jump at the top of it. I'm going to go for it a third time here. And then after that, it's not worth doing anymore. Well, after 3 attempts, it's not super worth doing. Unless you really want to go for the Hail Mary. After 3 attempts, all the possible time save is kind of just gone, so better off just doing it the normal way and eating a little bit of time loss. The second skip is the second part of that skip's pretty cool. You use your hitbox to force your way into a little bit of a break in the scenery, which doesn't have a collision for the bottom, but it has a collision on the sides. So the game understands that you're not standing on ground, and after a second it grants you a jump so that you can unstick yourself. So you can wedge yourself into some scenery and then jump up to the final platform. So once we get to the top of the building, we kind of just get a cutscene and then go back to the ground floor in a different area here. We're going to freeze these two enemies here, and then wait for the waterfall to unfreeze, just because by the time we freeze both of those enemies, by the time we get to the top, it's going to unfreeze. Then we're going to get back inside the building here. These areas here are pretty straightforward. We're just running around trying to dodge some enemies, flip some switches here so we can progress to the next stage of the game. Most of the city is kind of destroyed, so we have to get creative with the little resources we have left to try and traverse the city safely. I got on a little bit of a soft lock there. Again, the Infinite Blizzard, really finicky. I was kind of just stuck in place waiting for everything to release it so that I could continue. We get this canister explosion going, which breaches a hole in the next wall, or a wall in the next building. We then jump across, and we're going to turn the power back onto the building. So this area here, we're looking to get as much magic as we can. It hasn't been a magic font in a while, so we can't really stock up on that. So we're just looking to get as much magic as we can here. Again, don't really have an ensnared dragon left to use. Not that magic would help super well in this next fight. The hitboxes are all kind of off the ground. The important thing about this fight is that we have a lot of red magic to deal with. And we'll get to that in a couple of seconds here. So we're just finishing this fight off. There's a couple more enemies, and we're going to get a cutscene here. So this next boss here is really important that we have at least a full bar of red. And get a little bit of damage off the explosive earthquake there. The reason it's really important that we have a lot of red left is that this boss here actually is one of the riskiest fights in the game having Blizzard. Thankfully, it's actually pretty safe if you have a lot of magic. But basically, in between his 3 phases, I went over this earlier, all the bosses have different phases here. This boss here, when he goes into his different phases, he loses his health bar for a little bit. And in this little area here where he doesn't have a health bar, this entire animation here, if you freeze him to the point where that animation's going on and he's freezing, you soft lock the game and actually corrupt your data, so you can't even reload a checkpoint. You just crash the game, basically. Fortunately, with red magic, A, it's super safe, and B, even if it were to happen, safety saves are possible to make, just having a copy of the save right beforehand. And then once you get to this part, it actually doesn't matter. Unfortunately, you don't have magic that's super useful, since this hitbox is pretty awkward to hit, but you can kind of get away with using a couple combo moves there. Then just finish him off with a whip there. This fight's done. No soft lock at all. Easy every time. Get a little bit of a nice cutscene we can't skip of him demolishing the boss. And then we're ready to continue. With the boss's corpse there, we break open a door that wasn't previously open, so we can continue. So we're going to throw the power open to this next area here. Then we're going to do one of the harder skips in the game to do quickly. The reason this is one of the harder skips is because there's a lot of really strong enemies here, and a lot of really powerful weaker ones too, which is not something we really want to deal with. So you try and freeze as many of the smaller ones as possible, and then just go with it. Takes a couple of tries normally, just dodging the bullets, since the bullets are actually really accurate. But if you get lucky, you can get to here no problem. This area is a little iffy. Then once you get to the top here, you're almost golden. There is one last chance they have to hit you, which doesn't normally happen here. So we can get up to here no problem, get on the gargoyle, and we can get in safely without getting hit. So this next area here is an area which should be pretty difficult, except that we have Infinite Blizzard, so it's not too bad. We actually lose access to all of our magic here once we're fighting Victor. So we followed the Hoodest Man here into this cathedral, and there's all these kind of runes on it, and he reveals himself to be, well, he reveals himself at the end of this fight, but he is, well, he's the last warrior of the Brotherhood of Light, and he is disabled all magic here, so that we can fight on equal ground. But then we actually beat him, so he allows magic again, so he can fight at his full force. Not that it matters, because he's just frozen most of the fight, so we just wail on him here. I'm just gonna throw it into this phase here. So he has he's kind of giant here. He has all these rocks as kind of a force field. We just want to pop open our Chaos Claws and then hit all of them. As we start to reduce the amount, they're gonna speed up, change direction, and everything. But as soon as we do that, fight's over. He loses his power, and he goes into this cutscene here. So since we beat him, he's going to summon an otherworldly creature to come and help him, but it's not really gonna help him out too much. We're gonna take a little bit of time here to deal with that fight behind this really convenient picture that just popped up. Really makes you think, you know. Yeah, Grinched. What is it? What does it mean to be Grinched? Anyway, this is the part here. This is one of the two cutscenes that's pretty long. I actually learned a couple card flourishes to show off on my stream when this happens. Again, this happened a little bit after this video, and unfortunately I haven't had time to get a very good submission video. I've been very busy with working late, so I'm just re-recording over this one, so can't really see on this one. But I learned a couple card flourishes to show off during these two cutscenes here. So this cutscene's pretty much coming to an end. This is where we find out that this gentleman here is Victor Belmont. He is the last of the Belmonts, the last of our bloodline. He finds out who we are, or already knew. I don't remember. Anyway, we now know who each other are, and we are on the same page to stop the forces of evil. Now, don't get too attached to Victor, because this next part doesn't make... You know, the one thing I'll give this game is very consistent. This game doesn't make any sense at all, and this game is very consistent. Because this next part doesn't make any sense. But Gabriel here is going to kind of taunt us with his double jump ability. He's gonna, you know, use his angel wings to parkour very easily, whereas we have to take the long way. Then after this, we're going to meet up with Zobek's lieutenant, who is conveniently outside. We're gonna fight a couple of the demon spawns that are out there with the help of Victor and Alucard. Or, sorry, Zobek's lieutenant is what I meant. Zobek's lieutenant has his hands on the combat cross, the vampire killer. Sorry, the combat cross, the replica vampire killer. Not the true one, but what Victor Belmont uses to fight. Very much looks like the original Combat Cross, just doesn't have the properties that would kill extremely powerful enemies, such as Satan or Dracula or anything like that. We actually pick up an ensnared demon here, which makes up for the one we wasted earlier. So this is the part that doesn't make any sense. Victor Belmont, knowing that these two are fighting alongside him, decides to sacrifice himself. Yeah, that's really it. The plot reason is to make the second acolyte reveal himself, which makes zero sense at all. It's a death very similar to Carter's at the end of Halo Reach. Not really sure why it happened. Not really sure why they chose to kill him off that way. But, you know, they couldn't think of anything better, I guess. So they just did it. Not that they had to kill Victor in this, but they do for some reason. So now we're against this creature, which is impersonating us. Kind of trying to belittle us and stuff. Looks kind of similar to us. The important thing is it has the angel wings, or the demon wings, I guess in this case, which are going to allow us to double jump. And I guess since we're at the part of the double jump, this is kind of where I should explain the other glitch. Went on about this earlier on. The other glitch that doesn't work in PC version, which is the infinite long jump / infinite high jump. Basically, there are two missed abilities in the game, which allow you to use your dash and your mist power to kind of do a very powerful mist dash, which would do damage. The important thing is, once you have a double jump, on the console version, it allows you to reset your double jump. So you can jump, mist dash, and then use your second jump again to get a third jump, which is used in, and it can be done infinitely, so you use that in your long jumps or high jumps. The reason it's important, and it's not confirmed that it could save time, unfortunately I don't have a console version to test it, but I have a skip theorized for using that third jump. I basically just need like a foot of extra height, but I can't get it without that infinite high jump. And the theorized skip would actually skip the next 20 minutes, basically. It would be a 20-minute skip, more or less. But that's not here or there. So we're in this final stealth section. Again, lose our powers. We have to get rid of Blizzard. This one here, this is a really cheeky stealth section. We actually distract the first one and then dash straight in front of the other two, just to the end of the first one's hitbox, and then we missed past him. These were some laser air walls. If we get caught by them, we get shot and have to restart. But we can just double jump over them, mist up, and then get some magic up for our final. Sorry, not our final boss fight, but one of our last boss fights here. This boss fight is actually pretty easy, all things considered. Especially since we don't have our infinite blizzard. From this point on, I guess it is important to note, from this point on, we don't have an infinite blizzard anymore. It's not possible to pick it up on this boss fight, just because of the way this boss dies. Unfortunately, it doesn't... It's not a death that can be used, or blizzard can be used on. And then Zobek also cannot have blizzard used on him, and there's no more cutscenes left, enemies that die in cutscenes, so we don't get blizzard anymore. This entire exchange here has to be one of the events in this game that make the least amount of sense. So as we're walking in, we see Ghost Trevor walking to the left, and following him doesn't result in anything, so we go straight and meet the second acolyte. The second acolyte here is so much stronger than us. He just completely annihilates us and leaves us almost completely weakened and in this state where we can't fight him. So we have to lure him into the past. Magic Universe Castlevania area where we're somehow infinitely stronger than he is. And then because he doesn't want to deal with us, he just summons some statues to fight us, and we make quick work of it. And slowly 3 becomes 2, 2 becomes 1. And throughout this entire fight and the rest of the game, everything that just occurred doesn't make sense. Because you can't pass it off as like some dream sequence anymore where Dracula just has this dream and comes back revitalized. Now he's physically pulling another creature into this past fake world thing. And everything just stops making sense, really. So like I said, this is a fight that doesn't really end in a cutscene you can blizzard. It's important to note that no matter who you damage, they all share a health bar, so they'll always go down in the same order, so that the same statues always go down, third, second, and first. Oh, sorry, first, second, and third. So you'll always get this cutscene no matter what. And then after this cutscene, which again we can't skip, we'll defeat the second acolyte, and then we'll go through some interesting areas. The next couple areas have a lot of cutscenes to try and explain a lot of the things which up to now haven't been explained. I've already explained the whole Alucard plan and everything for the most part. Left out a couple of things, but a lot of this up to this point hasn't been explained. So we're going to go back to the real world. And we're going to look for the third acolyte, which is going to require a lot of navigation, a lot of mirrors of puzzles with using the mirror, a lot of cutscenes. But basically, up until this point, Dracula again knows nothing of any of this. So going back to Alucard's plan, once he stabbed his father, he goes to this fake world and plants all of his father's powers, which I don't know how he got, but he arranges all of the items to be put into places where you can find them, which again makes no sense. And then when Zobek sends the lieutenant to go waken his father, Alucard intercepts him inside the cathedral, so Zobek would have no ability to figure out what's going on, and he kills the lieutenant so that he can take his armor and impersonate him. So Alucard has been impersonating him the entire time, and Zobek doesn't know anything about it. So I was saying a couple of mirror puzzles here. It's basically just this over and over again. The mirror magically gets broken, and you have to rearrange the pieces so that the mirror is complete and the door is open. Which sort of makes sense since this is part of the old Castlevania city, Castlevania Castle, and the city was built around it. However, it also doesn't really make sense because, yeah. So this here is an interesting little area. By interesting, I mean a little unfortunate. So basically, these two pressure platforms here control the platforms that Alucard has to jump on. You have to hit them with a shadow dagger to drop them. Also, the pressure plates control where the fireballs will step. So you have to step on the platforms and let Alucard jump without having him incinerated by a fireball. Kind of a little annoying to deal with, especially since the targeting system is a little whack. But with enough practice you can get it. Alucard almost dies here actually, but he's able to get through the second time no problems. Again, these cutscenes just aren't skippable. And there's really not a lot going on in these, which is the most unfortunate part. If there was a lot of talking or something going on, it would be fine. But all the cutscenes that have talking, you wouldn't mind watching. A lot of those aren't skippable. So we're going to get a pretty huge flashback here, and we're actually going to have to do little bit of a boss fight here, in the sense that we're going to have to beat on a couple of the, well, really just the first boss here. The fight with what I call Icarus, the Sordid Gentleman. So these creatures here, we're going to get into a little fight with these. These are banshees. They turn into this creature. You have to fight them a little bit. If you let them live too long, they'll summon some werewolves, but we don't really care about those because we're not going to let it get to that point. You'll notice I don't really have much magic left, and this is an aerial enemy, so can't really use any of my blue magic, so I just kind of have to wail on it. Unfortunately, there's not really any good aerial combat spells, combat attacks. We just have to deal with what we're given here. Again, the closest to the Explosive Earthquake because the damage shoots into the air, but Explosive Earthquake takes a lot of red magic. So trying it as much as possible. They're starting to try and summon things, so you gotta come over here. Actually does get one werewolf off, I think. Yeah, it does get one werewolf off, unfortunately. I guess I shouldn't say werewolf, it's more of a demon creature, but cards here run into the last enemy. Drop it real quick and then we can proceed to the next area. Just picking up a little bit of magic here and there. We do have an ensnared demon for the next fight, but having a little bit of magic to start the fight off doesn't hurt, just because this is a fight that can take multiple ensnared demons if you did have it. This is a scene where we have to wait for Alucard to show up so we can do a tag team basically. Then we're gonna get a lot of cutscenes here. So like I said, we're gonna have to redo the Icarus fight. Right after we pick up the I don't know what I can remember what this book is called. It's the book at the opening of the game, but we're gonna the Book of Memories maybe. This book has all the memories that we had forgotten up till now, which is in the end why Zobek attacks us, because we regain our memory of our plan, and Zobek realizes that we betrayed him. Which is also important to note that this is now back in past Vania, fake Castlevania. This is no longer current Castlevania City, Castlevania. So we read the book, we regain all of our memories, and we realize, hey, we don't like you anymore, Zobek. Or we like you even less now. Our deal's off. So this is the tutorial. Again, basically I have to redo a couple fights at the prologue. Fortunately, all of these guys will die in one shot. Fortunately, we don't have to do the full fight with Icarus. He does dash around a lot, which is unfortunate, but we only need to land, I think it's 5 or 6 hits, and that will end the fight. It is humorous enough that it actually replays a decent amount of the cutscenes that played earlier for whatever reason, because you've forgotten it in the probably 8 hours it took you to get to this point in the casual playthrough. Alucard, of course, reveals himself at this point to remind him, and then we get into this fight with Zobek. He actually removes Alucard from the fight, so he can't help. We're gonna drop the ensnared demon here. We're gonna drop a bunch of earthquake on him. Skip the cutscene. So we only need to jump in the air here and hit 4 of these statues with our Chaos Bomb. We actually get grappled in the like one frame we're on the ground, which is unfortunate. But after this, they all go away. We can enter the second phase of just using Explosive Earthquake to deal with the boss. After that, we won't be able to use won't be able to do a third wave. And this is me actually screwing up the arcane, or not the arcane explosion, the Explosive Earthquake, just because of being bad at button presses. So we're gonna have to do a little bit of manual fighting here. But it's not too bad. Again, the Zobek fight's not hard. It's a little annoying just because he blocks a lot of attacks, but it doesn't do too much damage, so we don't really have to worry too much. Excuse me. You can really make use of the double jump here to avoid lots of his attacks, so you can kind of keep your bar up. I'm just getting a little greedy here, trying to get him to his next phase, so that's why I'm taking a little bit more hits than I should. But I'm able to get off a pretty big combo here, so I can get a lot of magic. Unfortunately, my red bar is actually a little empty here. So I'm going to need to wail on a couple of the minions here. I do need 4 shots of red here. You don't need to wail on minions too much here, just need a couple bars here. Then I'm able to destroy the statues, which are creating all of the minions, and then move into the final phase of the fight here. So I'm about where I want to stand for this attack here. Unfortunately, it puts me just a little farther back as soon as it spawns in, because the game's just like that. So this fight here is a little hard to set up this attack for, just because he's always shooting his whip around, but you get pretty decent hits on him with the Vaitana. Just trying to dash through his abilities, or his defenses here with this ability. And then finally I drop him to his final stage here, which again, this is why we can't get Infinite Blizzard off of him, because this is his death animation. We actually just need to turn into mist form and then dash through it. As soon as we mist through the defenses, we actually get the kill on him. So Zobek in a last-ditch effort tries to stab us with the Vampire Slayer before we finish him off. But unfortunately we were faster than him and stab him with the Void Sword, which is going to stop his attack completely and freeze him, which is how we're going to finally eliminate Zobek. We're going to freeze him completely with the sword and then shatter his remains so that he cannot revive this time. And then we finally pick up the Vampire Slayer, which is gonna be strong enough to, sorry, not strong enough, it's going to have the ability to actually finally execute Satan because of the enchantments on it. Alucard enters the area once the enchantment evocation that Zobek cast has been lifted. They talk about their final steps, which is going to be to find the last acolyte, track him down, and finish this fight. They agree to split up, and they'll meet up. Alucard will contact Dracula if he finds out the remains of the final acolyte. Fortunately, we know exactly where the final acolyte is, so we can just go right there. Unfortunately, it's like literally halfway across the map. Or not halfway across the map, it's on the other side of the map. Fortunately, we have a couple quick teleport features, which we haven't really used to this point. It's really makes navigating post-game looking for items really useful. But we already have all our items, so we don't need to do that. So we're just gonna backtrack a little bit right to the Badon fight, which we saw probably 20 minutes ago. The Badon fight was the one that I risked soft locking on, the giant creature in the Colosseum-like area. So this device here allows us to transport to any of the other rooms like this in the Castlevania castle. Fortunately, since the city was created on the ruins of Castlevania, these rooms still exist because, coincidentally, these 4 rooms never got destroyed for whatever reason. They were just left intact. So we can easily go to the art district here, right through the Abandon fight. I'm going to go through this door here towards where we fought Victor here, because there's going to be some little underground tunnels we can take directly to the science district where we want to go. This tunnel here is actually going to bring us directly to where we want to go, which is pretty nice. I'm going to take a little detour to get our magic bars filled here for the final fight, since we're running pretty low on blue magic, and we have no red magic at all. Void magic, chaos magic, red, blue, whatever you want to call it. Fortunately, there's a nice font right here, right beside to a white wolf medallion symbol. Not going to need to teleport into the other fake Castlevania, so don't need to make use of that. So this area here is, you might be able to see just a little bit for a split second here. This is where the theorized skip would take place. You'll see where the wreckage is just on the other side of this here. This wreckage isn't there until right after defeating Zobek, but I'm not convinced the hitbox where the rubble tumbles here, like right here, I'm not convinced that this is real. I'm pretty sure you can just jump through it, and you'll see that platform I landed on top of to jump across. I need like an extra foot to land on top of that to test getting over there, but I have no way to test getting over there on PC. So it's completely hypothetical, but if it does work, it would save 20 minutes at least. It would save from... You'd have to backtrack about 2 minutes, so it would be from the end of the last Belmondo split. No, the end of the Gabriel split to now, which would be about 20 minutes. And you'd be able to skip right to this part here, and there's 5 minutes left of this run. So it's a really, really useful skip. So this is another scene, going back to the others. One of the scenes I learned card flourishes for. This one here is not as long as the other one. Fortunately, this one here has it kind of like the other one, or sorry, unlike the other one had 2 cutscenes, and the second one you couldn't skip, but it was something that wasn't terrible. It was just a confrontation with Victor and Dracula. This one here has a second cutscene. It's a smaller cutscene, but again, it's just a confrontation with Satan. This one's actually skippable though, so it makes that a little easier. This cutscene here is just the third acolyte resurrecting Satan, and then Satan expressing displeasure with him and dismissing him. Once he's dismissed, he turns to Dracula and Alucard, and then decides that it's time to destroy this world. So he summons a giant giant world-destroying creature, and all three of you get teleported there somehow. So now we need to get to the back of the beast. We're kind of just hanging on the sides here. So we're going to crawl up the back of this beast. There's acid flying all around us. Once we get to the top, we're going to destroy the chains, move to the next section, and do it again, basically. Like I said, we are nearing the end of the game here. There's one more smaller fight, followed by the final boss fight against Satan. And that will be it. So again, Alucard just letting us know, hey, we need to get back up here. This section is actually pretty quick. Alucard makes sure to remind us not to get hit by this gunk because it'll hurt us. And then there's one set of lone banshees here with a really weird camera angle there. This part of the back of the beast is really weird, just in terms of the camera angles and everything. So we don't really have to worry about them transforming into a creature up here. We just need to worry about getting rid of them really quick, in terms of just being fast. Again, you'll notice I'm not using any magic up here because I want to save it all for the final fight. After that's done, we can run over here, grab the chains. So this fight, Satan doesn't like to fight fair, so he possesses Alucard here, and he's going to make us fight our own son. So we're going to drop the Talisman of the Dragon I talked about earlier, and we're going to instantly drop him down to basically his first bar there. We needed to hit him just a little bit more to drop him, just because of his cycles being a little bit longer. So we kind of try to get rid of him, knock him out of the body there. Doesn't work too much. So we knock him into his cycle here, and he's going to jump in the air. He's going to shoot some missiles at us. The missiles will do a little bit of DOT if we stand on them, but nothing really relevant. This part of the cycle doesn't really do much on anything but the hardest difficulty, because these blobs do literally no damage and they don't even really stun you or anything. So as soon as he gets back on the ground, we're gonna drop as much of the rest of our red magic here, throw him into the next state there, and then after that we're gonna basically be out of explosive earthquake magic, so we're gonna just go for Void Tana after that. Again, he's just going through this third stage here. Satan, it's important to note, he actually does have 4 stages, because why not? We're going to drop the rest of our explosive earthquake here and then switch to Void Tana. Once we stop getting knocked around by Alucard. So after we knock him into this final stage here, it's basically just the same thing. We're going to Void Tana him to his demise. After we do defeat him, he's going to plummet to the ground, and at the very last second we're going to, he's going to plummet to the ground, they're both going to crash into the earth, and then Dracula is going to charge at Alucard's body, Satan inhabiting it with the vampire killer, and go to execute Satan, who is possessing Alucard's body, making the ultimate sacrifice 2 for 1. The last second, Satan's going to jump out, and Dracula will catch him and vanquish him, saving himself and his son. But this is Castlevania Lord of Shadow 2. This is the run.